Hi, everybody. Welcome to Economics. I am Professor Johansson. I'm going to be running your online class, recording some videos, curating things for you to read and look at and watch online. Some of our video lectures like this will be a little bit longer. Some of them will be a little bit shorter. I'm going to try to focus on the most important things, the things that are hardest to figure out on your own, and share some stuff that I find super interesting. So in this first lecture, we're going to be learning to think like economists. We're going to go over some of the foundational terminology and things that really explain how all of our models are sort of formed, like why economists look at things the way that they do. I will also post these slides in Canvas, so if you want to print them out or take notes or follow along, you are welcome to do that as well. So the key ideas for this video lecture are going to be scarcity, cost-benefit analysis, opportunity cost, incentives, and positive normative analysis. These are going to be foundational and key to every economics class you take, so we will talk about them in both micro and macroeconomics. If this is your first econ class, we are going to definitely go over everything. If you've taken one or more classes before, hopefully some of this will ring a bell, refresh your memory. So scarcity is sort of the first idea in economics. The idea that everything is limited. We've got limited resources, time, everything. In regular life, like everyday life, when we think of something as scarce, usually we think there's like a shortage. We don't have enough of it. And so we don't really think of everything as being scarce, right? We think, oh, there's some stuff we have too much of, other things we don't have enough of. And we are going to go over some of those things as well. So for instance, when we talk about a shortage in economics, this is specifically linked to a particular price and quantity. So if we say there's a shortage, that means that at a certain price level, there's a higher quantity demanded than a quantity supplied. And when we say surplus, we also are talking about a price and quantity. So at a particular price, there is less quantity demanded than there is quantity supplied. So we've got extra, right? So price and quantity are important for both of these. When we say scarce, okay, or sometimes it's called scarcity, this just means that it is limited. And as economists, we say that everything is limited. Everything is scarce. So all resources are limited. Whether we have stuff people don't want to buy, it was still used with a limited resource that maybe we could have used better. If you go into a store full of t-shirts and they're all $800 and nobody wants to buy them, they might be a surplus. They have too many, people don't want them, but that doesn't mean it's not scarce, right? From our economist perspective, it is still limited. We had to use our limited time and production resources, natural resources to make that thing. So we say that everything is scarce, even if there happens to be a surplus or an abundance of something. So economics really is about studying choices people make in a world of scarcity. So we are studying how we decide, should we make those shirts? Should we make something else? Should we stop producing things? Should we focus on environmental concerns? Because we have limited resources. We have limited time. We have limited money, limited government resources, and personal resources. And so economics is all about studying the choices that people make because of scarcity. So we would say that scarcity is we have limited resources and unlimited wants. Economists classify everything as a want. We don't say that some things are needs. It just makes the math harder and our models more complicated. So we just classify everything as wants. Even if it is something you do actually need, like air or water, something for survival, but we just don't make that distinction in this class because it just makes our models too complicated and doesn't add anything useful for how we predict market outcomes. So whether we're talking about time, money, love, natural resources, anything, it's all scarce, right? Because everything is limited. And we would also say that there are trade-offs. Okay, so if you pick one thing, you can't pick something else. If we devote our resources to more higher towards education, public education, higher education, we're going to have less resources available for healthcare, environmental concerns, equity and justice, right? So we do have to pick things, and every time we put money, time, resources towards one thing, it means there's less available for other things we might care about. So we have to make choices because we can't have everything. We have to pick, do we want to go to school? Do we want a job? Do we want to major in this or that? What should we eat for lunch? We're also going to talk about things like, is Facebook free? What choices are you actually making when you are on Facebook? You're maybe not giving up money, but you're giving up time, you're watching ads, you're giving up your data. We're going to look at like, what's the optimal level of crime, optimal level of pollution. We'll get more into this later in the semester when we talk about externalities. And while we might think that stuff that we think is negative, like crime or pollution, we would say, oh, well, the optimal level is obviously 0, right? We don't want crime, we don't want pollution. But when we're making choices, we actually have to say, no, to maximize the use of our resources and our happiness and the benefits we get in society, we actually have to say we're going to allow some crime and some pollution and some things that we consider undesirable, because the amount of resources we would have to devote to eliminating that issue mean we're not going to get a bunch of other stuff that we find very valuable and important. We're going to also look at individual consumer choices. So can you eat too much at an all-you-can-eat restaurant? And I know that might seem easy, like, yes, of course you can eat too much. But we'll also look at, like, what's the optimal amount to eat? Which bite should you stop at, right? Because there's going to be one bite that's too much. So we're going to be talking about utility, which is consumer happiness, and how to make those best choices. So in this class, we're going to be focusing on more individual choices, so individual businesses, industries, individual consumers, and how they can optimize their profit or surplus or happiness. We're going to do a lot of cost-benefit analysis in this class. And for cost benefit, we're going to do marginal analysis, which we'll get into in a couple slides, where we're looking at extra costs and extra benefits of undertaking an activity. We will also look at totals and averages for certain calculations, but when we're trying to find the optimal combination, we want to look at those extra amounts to see how we can make those best choices. We're going to assume that people are rational, which I know can be really hard because I know a lot of people who I'm like, they are not rational, they're crazy, they're not making good choices. But from an economist perspective, we assume that people are making choices in their own best interest. So while something might not seem like a good idea to me, it probably does seem like a good idea to the person who is making that choice. And maybe I've calculated costs and benefits wrong. Maybe they have. Maybe we have different preferences. So like I'm an introvert, so I don't love attention. I don't like being in the spotlight. Whereas my sister is the exact opposite. She absolutely loves that. So making a choice that would lead to me like being on stage in front of 10,000 people would be a horrible choice for me. But it would be a great choice for her, right? Because we get different levels of happiness from those activities. So as economists, we assume that all people are rational and that they are making choices that lead to their own best interest. We are going to consider lots of different costs in this class, not just monetary costs. So we're going to be thinking about time costs, what else we gave up. Like if I'm in school right now, I'm not working at a job. If I'm doing a full-time job as a college professor, then I'm not doing a full-time job as an economic consultant, right? And I have to make those choices. So we want to consider all of those things. So let's look at an example. Would you walk downtown to save $10 on a $25 book? So let's assume that it's the book you need. It's for a class. It is $25 at the PCC bookstore. And if you walk down, there's a store, it's like an 8-minute walk from campus. Okay, so 8 minutes away, and they have a coupon, $10 off a purchase of $25 or more. You can get $10 off that book. Would you take that 8-minute walk to save $10 on that book? Now, let's say you also needed to buy a $2,500 computer, or maybe instead of, and at the PCC bookstore, it is $2,500. We're going to assume that you cannot get it cheaper on Amazon. Okay, there's an education discount, so this is the best deal around. But that same other store downtown that's 8 minutes away, you could use another coupon and save $10 off that computer. So 8-minute walk from campus, $10 off your computer. Would you walk downtown to save that $10 on your computer? All right, since we're not in a big class together, I didn't get to see your reactions. Let me tell you what typically happens in my in-person classes. So I would say majority of people say yes, they would walk downtown for the book. And then once we get to the computer, it's about half and half, right? So half say no, half say yes. Okay. Which is interesting because as an economist in a cost-benefit analysis from an econ class, this is actually a strange choice, okay? And let me show you why. So we really want to consider the opportunity cost, so what you had to give up to do an activity. And in this example, the opportunity cost of going downtown to buy the book is the value of your 8 minutes of time. So what is that time worth to you? It's going to be different depending on what time during the semester, what time of day, what else you have to do. Your value of your time might be different than the value of my time, but the opportunity cost, what you had to give up to use that coupon to save $10, was that you had to give up 8 minutes. So this is an implicit cost. The actual money you paid, so the $25 cost of the book, this would be an explicit cost. It's money you actually had to spend on something. Implicit is something you had to give up that isn't money. So you had to give up your time. Or if we're talking about lunch, if I eat lunch at Panda Express, my opportunity cost might be the Chipotle that I didn't eat. Okay, so it's just something else you gave up. And then what about the opportunity cost of going downtown to buy the computer? Also 8 minutes of your time to save $10. So we have the same extra cost of 8 minutes, and we have the same extra benefit of $10. And so if we're accurately using cost-benefit analysis and looking at the right things, if you said yes to going to buy the book, you should also say yes to going to buy the computer. Sometimes I get some arguments like, oh, I don't feel safe walking around with a new computer. You add some extra things on the cost side of like it might get stolen or whatever. But let's just pretend you're walking in a safe area and there's no extra like negative cost of walking around with your new laptop. Okay. So as rational economists, we want to say, what is our extra cost? What is our extra benefit? Is this a good use of my time? And our goal is to maximize our economic surplus. So if you're a business, that means you're maximizing profit. If you're a consumer, that means you're maximizing your happiness that you're getting from consumption. You're getting the most stuff for your money, the most stuff for your resources. We'll definitely get into this more, but it's going to be that extra benefit of an activity over whatever the cost was. And if we find, let's say the value of your 8 minutes, let's say you value that at $20, then you would say like, no, it's not worth it to me to walk to save that money. I could use my time better, and I'm just not going to use the coupon. I'm going to pay more. When would that be the case? Maybe you're like 8 minutes, like that's not big of a deal. Well, what if you have a test in 40 minutes and it's on this book? You haven't purchased it, you haven't read any of the pages, and like it's a huge chunk of your grade. Would you waste 16 minutes of that time to save money on the book? Probably not. That time value actually increased significantly. And if you have a test in a few minutes on this book, you're going to want every single minute possible to study and do all of that reading. Whereas if it's like the first week of class, and you don't really have anything to do, maybe you got out of class 20 minutes early, you got some extra time, maybe that value is much lower. Okay? So we're gonna try to evaluate that stuff and make those choices. And a lot of this we do already intuitively. You're good at this naturally, but we do actually make some mistakes, and hopefully after you take this class, you will make less of those mistakes. So some of the pitfalls of cost-benefit estimation, these are some errors that people typically make that lead to worse outcomes. You're still being rational, you're making choices that you think are good for you, but you don't have all of the information or the right information, you're looking at the wrong numbers. The first one is measuring costs and benefits as proportions rather than absolute dollar amounts. So in our last example, the absolute dollar amount of the benefit was $10. But a lot of us look at those and say, oh, 10 off of 25, that's like 40% off. $10 off of 2,500, and that's not so much. That's more like, 0.4% off. And so while 40% off is like, that definitely seems worth it, that's a good deal, 0.4% might not seem like that much. But the problem here is we're comparing this to the explicit cost of the item. So you're comparing it to the book cost or the computer cost, which is, we don't want to do that because we're going to buy it anyway, right? We're going to buy that item anyway, and it's not because of the coupon that we're going to buy it or not. And so really what we want to compare it to is that extra 8 minutes, or extra 16 if you're counting both ways, right? That extra 8 minutes of time. Extra 16 minutes, right? So that extra time that we have to spend. Second is ignoring implicit costs. So we may have looked at it as a percentage. We may have ignored the fact that walking takes time. We do this a lot in regular life. It's like, oh, that thing is cheaper, but you might have to spend an hour driving over there to get it. Maybe it's not worth the time. One time I waited in line for an hour at Baskin-Robbins to get a free scoop of ice cream, and I was super happy about it because I really like free stuff, which we will also talk more about in this class. But later I thought about it, it was the tiny scoop, so it's $2.50. It's is it really worth my time for an hour? Back then, definitely. Now that I've got 2 kids, I would say I don't know that it is. Maybe I should just keep my hour because I've got so much stuff to do. Do something else at that time and just pay $2.50 for the ice cream. But the value of your time really does matter. And then failure to think at the margin. So we really want to look at the extra, right? What happens if I do one more of this? What if it happens if I take that extra 8-minute walk? We're not looking at the total cost, average cost. We're just looking at the extra cost and the extra benefit of an activity. This we are actually going to do a lot during this semester. We're going to have a lot of different tables where we're looking at marginal revenue, value of marginal product of labor, the extra cost for reducing pollution. So this is something we're going to get really good at this semester. So let's look at a math example with some tables. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the marginal cost of each launch and figure out how many NASA rocket launches we should have in this scenario. Okay, so in this case, we're going to have a marginal benefit of $6 billion per launch. So that means for each rocket that goes up into space, society or the government or NASA or whatever has this $6 billion of benefit from whatever we get from this. Sometimes this is going to be constant. So in this case, every launch gives us that same benefit. Sometimes it's going to be increasing or decreasing depending on the situation we are talking about. We're also going to have our total cost and marginal cost. I'm going to show you how to calculate marginal from total. And then we are going to use a rule for finding our optimal choice. So best combination, best quantity to produce, whatever that best quantity is, that best number. We are going to use the rule where marginal benefit is greater than or equal to marginal cost. We are going to say yes. So yes, we should buy that. Yes, we should produce that. If marginal benefit is less than marginal cost, then we're going to say no. So we're trying to maximize our economic surplus, and this is going to tell us that optimal point that's going to give us that highest amount of economic surplus. So when we're looking at total benefits minus total cost, when we use our marginal benefit rule, this is going to give us the largest possible amount here, right? That biggest benefit. And if we say no, when the marginal benefits are lower than cost, we're going to take that money, take those resources, and use them for something else that's going to give us a higher benefit. In economics, incentives are also extremely important. Incentives change the costs or benefits of an activity to get someone to make a different choice. So an incentive might be, I'm trying to get my kids to clean their room, and I'll say you get weekly allowance. If your room is clean on Saturday, then I'll give you $5, right, every week. An incentive could be if you miss class, you won't get participation points, and it'll hurt grades. Right? Something that's going to change the cost or benefit of an activity to get you or someone else to make a different choice. And governments and schools, parents, anyone in authority, they try to use incentives regularly to change people's behavior. either for the benefit of the group or society or themselves, whatever it is. Upon a positive incentive is something that increases a benefit or decreases a cost. A negative incentive is something that decreases a benefit or increases the cost. But either way, it's trying to change that equation so that if you said no to something before because the benefit just wasn't high enough, now you might say yes to that. We're going to watch this quick clip from Freakonomics about potty training. Actually, we are not going to watch this clip because I forgot to turn on my computer sound and it won't let me do it. I will put this link on the Canvas page so you can watch this on your own. Basically, what happens in this clip is an economist is trying to bribe his daughter with M&Ms to go to the bathroom, and at first it works great. She goes to the bathroom, she gets her M&Ms, and then all of a sudden she learns how to beat the incentive scheme. So she goes and trickles out a couple of drops. She gets some M&Ms. She says, I have to go again. She goes again for another bag of M&Ms. So it's like every time she needs to pee, she's going to get 5 bags of M&Ms, which obviously was not the intent of her parents. And that's going to be true with governments or anyone who tries to make incentives. People are going to find loopholes. They're going to find ways to cheat the system or get around it. Same thing with the tax system. And so we have to try some stuff. We have to adjust things. Sometimes, governments, they think they know what works and they do a good job. And sometimes they don't and they do a terrible job. So I will put that clip in the on the page. We're also going to be doing a lot of normative and positive analysis this semester. And positive does not mean good or true necessarily. It just means that it is an observation. It's something we can see. We can actually check to see if this is true or false. But it is something that is measurable. Something where data is available. I could say that it's raining outside right now, and we can all go look and see if it's actually raining outside right now. So I could be wrong, maybe it's not raining, I could be right, but it's something we can test. Normative, so notice it's not negative and positive, it's normative and positive. A normative statement or normative analysis is looking at people's opinions, how we think we should use our resources. These are value judgments. So I think we should spend more money on, children's daycare, having public daycare, because that's actually a big thing that contributes to poverty and inequality. And having had 2 little kids myself, I definitely see how difficult it is to work and do other things when there is not childcare available. So my opinion is that we need to spend more money, more funding on childcare in California or United States or whatever. Now, you might agree with me. Maybe everybody agrees with me, and then as a society, we'll choose to use our resources for that. But just because we all agree doesn't make it a fact, right? It still is an opinion. If I wanted to turn that into a positive statement, I could say increased childcare availability leads to less poverty or less inequality. So that is something we can measure, right? We can say, okay, what happens in states or cities that there's more childcare available? How is that related to the data on poverty? So my opinion might be like, I see this data, it reduces poverty, so I think we should spend more resources on that. But if you remember back from when we talked about trade-offs, if we do spend more on that, it means we have less available for something else. And so we have to make that choice. So while we might all agree that we want less poverty and less inequality, the cost for some of us might be too high. We might have to give up something that you or me or someone else thinks is more important. And so we may not end up spending our resources on that as a society. All right, so let's do some examples, okay? So I'm going to read these. I want you to think, are these a value judgment? Or is it something that is like data, measurable, observable? If taxes increase on cigarettes, there will be less teenage smoking. So is this an observation? Is this something we can collect data on? Or is this somebody's opinion and a value judgment? Okay, this is a positive statement. So you might have thought because it says if we do this, then something will happen. That's not observable. It might not be right this moment, right? We have to actually do the activity to see if it works. But it is something that we will be able to measure once it happens. We can also look at other areas where they have increased taxes on cigarettes and see like what happened with teenage smoking. So it could be a false statement, it could be true, but it is positive because it's something we can observe. Number 2, all classes at PCC should have free textbooks. So this is normative. Okay. So it says should, right? This is a value judgment. We're saying we should use our resources to do this. And having free textbooks does actually take a lot of resources. So your professors have to do a lot of work to curate the material, switching all of their slides and activities and other things. It can be a lot, right? So it's not a costless activity. There is at least an implicit time cost. Other costs we can talk about as well, but that's going to be normative because it's a value judgment. If you want to turn this into a positive statement, you could say having free textbooks increases student grades. Okay. Number 3, prices have increased because of higher tariffs. This is a positive statement. Okay, we can actually measure that. We can look and see what has happened with prices. We can look and see what has happened with tariffs. We can run data analyses, some regressions, right? See what happens and know if that's true or not. So it could be true, it could be false, but it's something that we can observe and measure. Number 4, patient K should be given dialysis so the hospital can get a second machine. Now, if you haven't done the dialysis exercise, you might not entirely know what this is referring to at the moment. However, you can take this statement. You don't need to know necessarily what it's talking about. You can look for clues in the sentence to figure out if it's a value judgment or something observable. So, okay, getting a second machine, we can observe that if they got one or not. However, this does say should. We should do something. It's a value judgment, okay? Or it could say, we don't like patient K, so we're not going to pick him for dialysis. Right? That would also be a value judgment. So anything that's saying this is good, this is bad, we should do this, we shouldn't do that, that's going to make it a normative statement. And number 5, the price of coffee at Starbucks is $4.75. Yep, this one is also positive, right? This is something we can observe. We can walk into Starbucks. I'm going to walk in and see that it says $4.75. You're going to walk into a different Starbucks and see that it's $5.75. And then we're going to argue with each other about the price of coffee. But it really is still positive because we were both observing things. If we talked a little bit more and figured out we were at different stores or talking about different types of coffee, right? This is something that we could resolve. So all of our models, our tables, our charts, our graphs, those are all going to be positive analysis. We'll be looking for what's the profit maximizing quantity, what's the optimal level of consumption for this consumer, and then the normative side, what should be, that's where your opinions are going to be added in. So in our discussions or later in life when you're voting for things, we'll try to keep mostly things positive so we can observe the same data, but we might come to different conclusions. So for instance, this last one, price of coffee is $4.75. We can observe that together, right? But one of us might conclude that this price is too high, and another person might say, no, this is a good price, right? This is worth it to me. And this is the normative side of it. So we can both observe this same price and still come to different conclusions about whether or not it's worth it to spend money on that coffee. Economics is trying to be a science. So we are going to use the scientific method. We're going to have hypotheses, we're going to collect data, we're going to test things, and we're going to use a lot of models. So we're going to have graphs and tables and things that are supposed to represent real life. They're going to be very simplified versions of reality, and they do need to be evaluated and revised. So a lot of times there's something that has worked for 10 years, 20 years, hundreds of years, but because our behavior has changed, our technology has changed, our values have changed, our models might not really work anymore. So we're going to make assumptions about consumers and producers that may not always be true. They may not be true now, they may not be true in the future. And when we figure out that those things aren't accurate anymore, we do need to revise our models. we're going to try to look at a lot of cause and effect. So prices went up because consumer income changed. It can be tricky though, because just because two things are correlated, meaning they go together, consumers have more money and then they spent more, doesn't necessarily guarantee that one thing caused the other. In this video, which I will also link a clip to, back when polio, it's a polio virus, was a big deal, they noticed that polio increased. So this is like number of cases. This is like time. Increased at the same time that ice cream sales increased. So ice cream and polio were both spiking at the same time. And one of the things that they thought might be happening at the time is they thought maybe eating ice cream is causing polio, causing the disease polio. Because they didn't really understand polio very well. They didn't really know what it was back then. They didn't understand viruses nearly as well as they do now. And so these things were correlated with each other because they were moving in the same direction, but they were in no way caused by each other. This was actually a problem of omitted variable bias. And that means there's actually a third variable that's causing both of these. And in this case, it was the summer, the heat. The polio virus is a lot more active when it's warm outside, and people are eating a lot more ice cream when it's warm outside. So the summer is causing higher ice cream consumption, and the summer is causing more polio viruses. And really, ice cream and polio have nothing else to do with each other whatsoever. So we really do need to be careful. It's especially hard when it's something we don't understand very well. So like at the time, it made sense to people. Yeah, obviously ice cream causes polio. But now that we know more, it's like that makes absolutely no sense, right? Those things are in no way related. And so we just want to be careful. We want to think through our conclusions, maybe challenge some of your own assumptions and ideas when it comes to stuff going on in the world, society. We're going to learn how to look at things from different perspectives so we can see like why maybe certain governments or policy choices are made versus other ones when they may seem like such a bad idea from our end. So we'll be learning a lot this semester. We're going to be going through some stuff pretty quickly, some stuff a little bit slower, but please come stop by my office hours, send me a message, go to tutoring, get the help that you need to make sure that you're understanding this. Some of it you'll never use again after this class, but some of it is actually really helpful for daily life and making good choices. And I hope to be able to share my excitement and enthusiasm for the subject. So I'm looking forward to a great semester with you. Have a great week.